Are you ready to build a stunning landing page for your SaaS company? In this video, I'll show you how to harness the power of React and Tailwind to create a beautiful, responsive website that not only looks amazing, but also converts visitors into customers. This video will teach you how to build an amazing website with a focus on clean design, smooth animations, and intuitive user experience. Why is a modern landing page so important? Well, in today's digital landscape, your website is often the first impression customers have of your product. A well-designed landing page can set you apart from the competition by showcasing your SaaS offering in a compelling way. But you might ask, what if I don't actually have a SaaS business? Well, then in that case, you will still learn how to make this amazing looking website, which will improve your skills in React, Vite, TypeScript, and TailwindCSS. Now, before we get into the video, if you want to sign up for my newsletter, you will get discounts on my upcoming paid courses. So if you want to do that, go to PedroTech.co. Also, if you could leave a like and subscribe, I would massively appreciate it. Now that we got that out of the way, let's dive in. So to start the project, I open up here a folder inside of my code editor, which is VS Code, and I will open up the terminal over here, and we want to run the command that is going to create our Vite application. So the command we're going to run is npx create Vite. Now this is going to prompt up a question asking us for a project name. I'm going to put a dot because I don't want to make another folder inside of the directory we are already inside of. I just want to put the project inside of this folder and not have to navigate to that other folder. So I'll just put a dot and we'll press enter. Then we'll want to select the framework of choice. This video is fully in React, so we're going to choose React. Then we could build this using JavaScript. We could build this using Remix, but I prefer to use TypeScript. So I'm going to press enter. And then we want to run npm install so that we install all of the packages that come with the Vite generated app. And when that's done, we want to run npm run dev. So let's run npm run dev. And as you can see, we should be over here and the app should be running on our computer. So what we want to do now is install a couple packages that we will need for this project. So I'm going to open up another terminal over here and we want to install the following packages. So the first one is packages related to Tailwind. So we're going to be styling our project using TailwindCSS. And TailwindCSS doesn't come directly when you install Vite. So we do need to install it. So I'm going to run npm install TailwindCSS. And we also want to install the TailwindCSS Vite wrapper. So I'll say Vite, and we'll install this. Now, when this is done, we want to also install a state management solution that we will use to then create the theme of our project. So if you saw in the demo, we will be able to switch between dark mode and light mode. So I definitely want to handle that through a system or store that is going to manage that state. Now, we could do that by using the built-in in-house solution in React, which is using the context API, but I personally prefer to always use Zustand as the solution in cases like this. So we will be using Zustand, so I need to install npm install Zustand. Perfect. Now, one thing I want to note as well is that we are using Tailwind version 4. So Tailwind version 4 came out a couple months ago, and there's a lot of confusion on how to use it and how to install it with Vite. So I want to show you guys right at the start how you would use Tailwind in its newest version. So the first thing we want to do is we want to just clear out our files. So first of all, we're not going to need this app.css, so I'll just delete it. And when we go to our app.tsx, I'm going to delete almost all of this UI over here. And I'll also delete all of this over here and all of the boilerplate code. Perfect. We also want to delete the import for the app.css. Then we'll come to our main.csx, and actually here we should leave it completely alone. But one thing I want to point out is on the index.css, we want to delete everything from here because we are going to add styling of our own. Now that we have that out of the way, here's how we set up Tailwind. I go to my vite.config.ts, and with the new version of Tailwind CSS, I can import Tailwind CSS from TailwindCSS/vite. And then in our define config, we can add the new TailwindCSS plugin so that it actually starts working in its newest version. Now, another thing I want to point out is that with the new version of TailwindCSS, there is no, in version 4, you actually can omit the tailwind.config.ts or JS file. So that's why we don't have one over here. Now, what we also want to make sure we're doing is in our CSS file, so in our global CSS file, which is this one over here, which is called at the highest point of our app, right? It's called in the main.tsx. We want to import at the top the Tailwind CSS library, just like this. If you don't do this, none of the Tailwind styling will be applied. Now, right off the bat, I want to set up the CSS that we're going to put in this file. Now, the CSS here is not really the CSS that you would imagine inside of a CSS file. This is just us defining the different design tokens and the different colors and so on that we will be using throughout our app. This is also where we are going to create our custom utility classes that will reference our theme variables. So if you know, we're going to be building a light theme and a dark theme. So in order to do that, we have to define the styling for the elements in a dark mode and also in light mode. So that's what we're going to be doing in this file. Now we'll start defining the theme for our website with the different colors for the different elements we want to predefine. Now this is going to be for the light theme. So for example, I want to define a custom color background. So I'll come to this theme over here and I'll define a color called color background that we will use to set the background of our light mode theme. Now, when the website is in light mode, I want to make that color be white, which this accepts an RGB number. So in RGB, white is 255, 255, 255. Now there's other colors, for example, that we might want to set up. But most importantly, we also want to set up a dark version of this theme. And the way we're going to do that is right below this, we're going to basically set up a class that we're going to add to our elements called dark. And in here, we can set up the same colors as variables as we're creating on the theme over here, but for the dark version. For example, the dark background would be a color that resembles more like a deep blue. So I'll make it something like this, or more of a dark, like a black bluish. So I chose this color. Now, when the HTML element has the dark class, this will override the tokens for the colors. So we can define all the different colors we might want to use in this website inside these two classes. Now, these are all the variables we're going to be using color-wise in this project. So in this project, we're going to have 3 different types of headings, right? Heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and I call them that to represent an H1, H2, and an H3 tag. Now, on top of that, we're going to have the box SD, which basically will represent the box shadow for elements. So we'll be setting it to transparent, meaning that no shadow will be applied in dark mode, as you can see over here, which will help make the design look kind of clean and prevent an overly heavy visual on dark backgrounds. But you can see that we did put a box shadow on the light theme. Now the box border over here, it will define, as the name implies, the border for any of the boxes. Now boxes, I mean, it's like elements such as cards and containers, and we set up a color for it over here. In light mode, it will be white, and in dark mode, it will create kind of like a muted blue-gray shade that looks really good with a dark interface. And on top of that, the box border for the dark mode is very subtle, as you can see, with the opacity of 10%. So it will give more of like, at least it's barely seen, but I think it gives a nice aspect to the borders. Now, if you want to check out all of these, by the way, the code for this entire project will be in the description, so you can just copy this part. But since this is a mainly UI themed video, I will be going over every single Tailwind class that I write and explaining what I'm doing. Now we want to build our custom utility classes that will be able to reference our theme variables. So we created all of those variables and now we want to use them. So I'll come over here and I'll set up a layer, call it utilities. And inside of here, I want to set up a couple classes that we want to reuse in our project. So whenever we have certain elements in our project, we can then come ahead and put this as a class inside of that element, and whatever styling we apply over here will apply to that element as well. So what kind of styling do we want? First of all, we want to have the styling for the background color. So I'll call it the BG body. So whenever we're setting up the body for a background, we want to set the background color equal to an RGB value of a variable, and then we insert the color GB variable that we created over here. So all we're doing in this case is we're just saying that whenever we put this class in an element, that element will have a background color equal to whatever the value for the color BG variable is at the moment, which again will switch depending if we are in dark and light mode. So we'll add the other classes. We'll add the BG box background. So BG box background. This will be for the color box. Obviously, the names here you can call whatever you want. I called that whatever I thought made more sense while I was writing this. Then here we will change this to text heading 1, and we'll set the color of the text to be equal to the heading 1 variable. Now we'll do the exact same thing for the other two, but obviously all we change is the 2 and the 3, and we should be good to go. Now there's only two other pieces of styling I want to add to this file, and then we can get started with the components. The first one is I want to make the scroll behavior of our entire project be smooth. And I also want to set a specific font for my project, and that font family will be Railway Sans Serif. Perfect. Now let's close this and we can start building our project. So I want to start by creating the folders to show you guys the structure of how we're going to structure this project. So in our source folder over here, we're going to create 3 folders. We're going to make over here the components folder, which is where most of our project is going to go inside of. Then we're going to make the utils folder, which we're going to have some helper files that we might want to reuse in our project. And then we're going to have the store folder, which is where we're going to create the state management solution using Zustand. Now in our components folder, we're going to divide this into a couple different files. So the first one is going to be the sections folder. So the website is going to be a single page app where we're going to have different sections. Like we're going to have the section for describing the website, describing the services. Remember, this is a landing page. So there's going to be a part where we explain what the website is, then a part where we have a call to action, a part where we show the different prices, and so on. So those are all sections that are going to exist in the sections folder. Then we're going to have a shared folder, which is going to contain components that we want to reuse multiple times in our project. So we're going to make a file, a component for a button link, for containers, for titles, and so on, because those are things that we reuse multiple times in our website. So we want to put them here because they're going to be reused in different components. Then I want to make an elements folder. And the elements folder is basically going to contain the 2 different elements that we have in our website, which is going to be the navbar and the footer. Now, the final folder is going to be the cards folder. And this one over here is because we're going to have 2 different types of cards in our website. We're going to have a card where it's going to show information, so numbers and so on. And we're going to have a card for different service information as well. So you'll see what we actually end up putting over here. But primarily speaking, this is the division of our folders. Also, we're going to have over here a layout.tsx component, and this is going to be the first component we're going to create. Now I want this component to wrap our entire app over here, and I want to call it like this. I want to call it and put all of the different sections inside of it. So let's build it. We want to first define the props that this component is going to accept. So the first prop that we want to accept for the layout, and we'll call it layout props, is a title, right? It's going to be the title for this website. Now, the reason why I want to do this is so that we can very easily switch the title of the website, and whenever we want to switch the title of each individual layout. So this is going to take in a string. And when I mean the title, I mean literally the title, this thing over here, okay? And we're going to pass it as a prop whenever we call it. We're going to pass something like this. Now, I called my website Edge AI, but you can call it whatever you want because this is a fake company and it's a fake landing page. So over here, I want to put also the children. Since the layout is going to be a wrapper component, we want to definitely make it accept children's. Now, we'll create the component by saying export const layout, and we'll make this component return some JSX fragment. Now, inside of here, I want to put the following. I want to put the structure of our website. Now, since this is the layout, the structure of the website is going to look like the following. It's going to have the navbar, which we haven't made yet, but we will in a second. Then we'll have the children, which will be all the sections in our website. And below the children, we're going to have the footer. Now, the children, we can get it from the props. We're going to set this equal to be the layout props, and we can get back the title, and we can get back the children. Now, the children will exist inside of here. And we want to wrap the children around with some styling that we will apply to the entire section, to all the different sections in our website. Now, the styling I want to apply here is I want to set the section equal to a flex, make it flex, and make it flex column. I also want to put a gap in the Y direction of 20 to each of them so that we have a space in between the sections. We'll also set up an MD gap at the Y direction of 32, and I want to set the overflow to be hidden. Perfect. Now let's quickly just make the navbar and the footer components so that it stops complaining. So I'll come to the elements folder over here, and let's make the navbar.tsx, and let's make the footer.tsx. Now in both of these, we're not going to really write anything in them yet. So in the footer, I'm just going to make the component, and I'll just make it return, again, some JSX fragment. And I'll copy this, paste it in the navbar, and I'll make it like this as well. But now we can just import this, and it will stop complaining. Perfect. Now, how do we set the title of the website, so of the page, equal to whatever we passed as props? Remember over here, if we import this, we pass the Edge AI as part of the title prop, right? So how do we actually set that when we get it from the props over here? Well, the way we're going to do this is we're going to use the use effect hook, which is going to allow us to run some code when the component is mounted. And specifically, we will also be able to run this whenever the title prop changes. Now inside of this function, I want to just set the document.title equal to the title. And you'll see that when I come over here, it's now set to Edge AI. Perfect. Now let's come back over here, and we're pretty much done with our layout. It's still complaining because we haven't put any children inside of it. So let's put a children inside of the layout. To do that, let's start with the first one. And this one is going to be called the hero section. It is where we're going to put the main driver to the website. It's going to have a cool title with some nice UI, and it's going to ask for the user's email. Now, this is where we're going to put our attention grabber with a cool image and different glow effects in the background. Now, if you want to use the same images as I'm using in this project, don't worry, a lot of them are URL based and you can access them for free online. But some of them are not, such as my actual icon that we are for the website, for the logo, right? But you can access it whenever you go to my GitHub repository with this code. I'll put the icon there as well. So let's start building this hero component. We're going to come over here and we're going to say export const hero, and we'll just make the component return a section. Now we won't expect any props from this, and we can't really write much of it yet because we don't have a lot of the shared components that we will make in this folder over here, right? For example, let's think about what a hero section will require. So it will require a container, which is probably a component we want to reuse multiple times. It is going to require a paragraph, which again is a component that we definitely want to reuse. And most importantly, it is going to require a button, which is another component that we definitely want to reuse. So we can't really make this hero component yet, but we just generated it so that this will stop complaining and we can put something as a children to it. Actually, I think something that we can start building so that our website doesn't look super empty is the Navbar and the footer. Those are easy ones to get out of the way. So let's start with the Navbar. I'm going to come over here. Let's close all of this and let's go to the elements folder and let's go to the Navbar. Inside of this Navbar file, I want to create an array over here, which is going to represent all of the different links and titles that we're going to have in our Navbar. So I'm going to call this nav items. And let's think of which links we want to have in the title of our website. We want to have a link for the homepage. So I'm going to make that be an object with the href equal to hashtag. Now, why do I make it a hashtag and not an actual route, right? Or like something like this? Because this is not going to be a multi-route app. It's going to be all in a single page. This is a landing page. And in landing pages, by setting things like, by using hashtag, you can actually reference a section with an ID equal to whatever you put on this hashtag. So when you end up clicking on the link, instead of navigating to a different route, you will actually scroll to that section, making it really cool and nice to see. So we'll make this the home section. So I'll put a text over here and I'll set it equal to something like home. Then we'll do the exact same thing for the other sections. We'll make this be for the services, the about us, and the features. So we'll set this to services and this to services, then this to about us, and this to about us as well. Then this will make it into features and this into features as well. Perfect. So these are the links we're going to be using. Then inside of here, let's start with making this be a header. So we'll set this into a header and we'll give some class names to it. I'll set the class name equal to absolute. Then I'm going to set an inset of x to be 0. I'll set it to top 0. I'll set a z index to 50 and a padding on the y direction to be 6. Now, this is a good time for us to make our first shared component. I don't want to make all of the shared components at once because I don't think that you guys will gain anything from it. I think you guys will gain the understanding as we need them. So when we need to create one of them, we will create instead of creating all of them at once and confusing you on why we're doing something before we actually need to do it. But this is a good time for us to make the container. So I'm going to come over here in the shared folder and let's make a container.tsx component. And a container is very simple because a container is something that doesn't really apply much like substance to it. It just contains a bunch of information, right? So it's primarily just going to be a div that is going to accept some children and is going to have some shared class names. So we're going to make over here export const container, and this component will take in some props for sure. Now the props is going to take in is going to be container props. And for most of the shared components, this is what the props are going to look like. We're going to need the children because they're going to wrap around something, right? It's going to be a wrapper component. And the children will have a type of React.React node. And also, they're going to accept the class name. But that's actually going to be optional because if you want to apply some custom styling to the container that just extends the styling that we want to share between all of them, then feel free to do so. And you can just pass it through the class name prop. So we'll accept both of them. We'll say children, and we'll also get the class name. But because class name is also possibly null, we want to set an initial value of an empty string. Then inside of here, we'll just return div, and we'll wrap this around with the children. Then the class names that we want to share between all of the sections which call this container component is going to be this. First, we want to make this into a not normal quotation marks. We're going to use backticks because in the end, we will just insert the class name, right? The extension that we can accept from prop in case there is any. But before that, we're going to set the max to auto. So the margin x to auto. Set a max width 7 XL. We'll set a width full, then a padding x to be 5. And we'll also set the small to be padding x to be 8, medium to be padding x to be 14, and large to have a padding x to be 5. Perfect. So this is all we want to do for the container. And now, if we want to use this, we come over here and we just call the container component, and we can reuse it multiple times in our project. So this container that we have, we want to wrap it around a nav that is going to contain the different links that we created over here. Now we'll set a class name to this nav. We're going to make it be a width full. We'll make it flex. Also, we'll justify between and set a gap of 6 and make it relative. Then we want to put the image, right, the logo. And I'll even set a section over here. This is going to be the logo section. The logo will navigate to the homepage in case you click on it. But it is different because it's going to be justified to the left of the navbar when the links will be to the right or to the center. So over here, we'll set a div and we'll set a class name of min with max, then inline flex and relative. Then inside of the div, we're going to set an a tag that will wrap around an image. Now the image is going to be the logo for your website. And I made my own logo using LogoFast. Now LogoFast is this website over here. You can use it. It's by another YouTuber called Mark Lowe. If you follow the indie SaaS company industry, you definitely know who he is, and he built this thing where you can easily make different logos. This is not a sponsor or anything. I watch him sometimes, and I really like this specific product because you can make a logo really quickly. So if you want to reuse my logo, feel free to use it. Again, it will be in the description. And that logo is this one over here. To be honest, looking more into it, it looks kind of ugly in my opinion, but I thought it made sense with the Edge AI name, and that's why I made it. So I put it in the assets folder, and this is where you want to put stuff like this. It's an SVG. And it's called icon.svg. So we'll close this over here and we'll go back. Now in our logo section over here, I want to add an href to our link. It's going to take us to homepage, and I'll set some class names to it. I'm going to make a relative, flex, and I want to center it to the center, and I want to set a gap of 3. Now inside of the image over here, we want to import the logo, right? So I'm going to import logo from, and then I can just put I'll go back twice, then I'll go back twice again, and I'll say assets/icon.svg, and we now have access to the logo, which we can set to the source. Now, you see our website now shows the logo, but obviously the styling doesn't look good yet, but it will soon enough. Now in the image over here, we want to set an alt so that we're good with accessibility. I'm just going to say Edge AI logo, and this should be fine. Now, since the image was massive, we want to set a width of 10 and a height of 10, and this should make it look pretty nice on top of the navbar. Now, below this, we also want to put a title, right? So the name of the website. And I'm just going to write Edge AI over here. We want to add some class name to it because initially it will just look really simple. So we want to basically set an inline flex, and we want to make the text a bit larger. So I'll make text large. I'll make the font semi-bold, and I'll set the text heading 1. Now this is what it looks like. And I don't know if you caught that. What is the text heading 1 class? Well, it's the one that we created over here, right? So it has the color that we set over here, and we just called it in our own CSS file, in our own Tailwind CSS class name. So this is how we're going to apply them. Perfect. Now we want to set the navigation links. So I'll create a div over here, which will basically contain all of the different links, and we'll set a class name equal to, and we'll put over here flex, then flex column. Then I want to set on the large screens, I want to set it to flex row. I also want to make the width be full, and on large screen I want to make it justify between. Also in a large screen I want to make it items center. So I'll say item center. And I also want to set it to absolute top full. Now I want to set the left to be 0 and on large to be static. And on large to be top 0. Now I can actually on the item center over here, I'll press enter so that you guys can see everything in the same place. And then over here, I'm going to set the BG body, which you remember is the class that we added on our CSS file. Then I'm going to say on large scale, I'm going to set this to BG transparent. I'm writing this wrong. And I'll set a border X, and I'll set the border to be border X box border, which is what we set as well. Now in a large scale, we want to set the border X to be 0. And on a large scale as well, we want to set the height to be auto. Perfect. This should go a little bit to the left, and I'll set this down as well so you guys can see everything at once. Perfect. Now inside of this div is where we're going to have the different links in our navbar. So I'm going to create an unordered list, which is going to call the nav items array, and it's going to map through it. Now each item is going to get an item and also a key, and is going to return a nav item that is a component we're going to create. Now in this unordered list, we're also going to put some class names. So we'll make the border be T, then the border box border, the large be border T0, and we'll set a padding X equal to 6. On a large scale, we'll set the padding X to be 0. Then we'll set a padding top to be 6. And on a large, we'll set the padding top to be 0. And we'll set it to flex column direction. On a large screen, we'll set the flex to be on the row direction, because if you think about it, on a smaller screen, like when we switch from a large to a small screen, things just go into a row direction, in a column direction, in a small screen, and in a row direction in a large screen, because there's more width, right? So we'll come over here and we'll set a gap on the Y direction to be 4, a gap on the X direction to be 3. Then we'll make the text to be large, so all of the links have a large text, and we'll set the text color to be text heading 2. Then we'll make the width be full, and on the large screen will be justify center, and in a large screen we're gonna set the items to center as well. Now yeah, this was massive, so let's obviously cut a little bit of this so you guys can see everything in the same screen, and perfect. Now let's create the nav item component. So we'll make this in the shared folder as well. We're gonna come over here and make the nav item.tsx. Then inside of here, let's just create export const, and we'll create the nav item. This component will take in props just like the container. So I might just actually copy this whole component, paste it here, and then just switch the titles. I think that will be quicker. And we'll change this to nav item props, and this to nav item props as well. Now the class name, or whatever the interface takes, it doesn't actually take any children or any class names. it will take in two things. First, it will be an href, which is where is going to the nav item is going to take you. And the second one is going to be a text, which will also be a string. Now we'll get both of them, href and text. Now text won't have a set default value, and the UI that we return from this is going to be a list item. Now this list item is going to take in also a link, so an a tag that is going to have the text inside of it. Now the href to this a tag is going to be the href we get from the props, and the class name we're going to use is going to have a small animation. So we're going to set an animation for this. We're going to set the duration to be 300, the font or the font to be medium. Then we're going to say is linear, and we're going to set an animation when you hover it to be text primary, and the padding Y to be 3. Now what this will do is when we import the nav item, we'll just set the href to be equal to the item.href and the text to be equal to the item.text. Now we still want to use the key, so I'll just set the key directly to this, and since it's the key from a list, we don't have to pass it through props and it will accept it automatically. Now you can see that this is how it looks, and it looks pretty nice. We can click on all of them, but obviously the sections don't exist yet. And when we pull this a little bit closer, it looks a little bit screwed up, but it's because we haven't finished setting up all of our stylings. More specifically, I think we forgot to add one, I think probably here, we forgot to put the H to 0 and the overflow to hidden. Perfect. When we pull this closer, you see it disappears. Perfect. Now let's go back over here and let's make the get started button, right? It's the button that when you click on it, it will basically take you to the call to action section. And we're going to make it right below this. It's going to be a div. Now the class name to this div is also going to be a bit large. We're going to set a class name that in large screens, we're going to set the min width max. And then we'll set it to flex. Set it to item center so we can center it horizontally. Then we want to set the small screen to have a width max and a width of full. Then we want to set the padding bottom to be 6. And on large screens, we don't want to set a padding bottom. So we're going to say PB to be 0. Then we only want to set a border to the bottom. And we'll set that to be a border, box, border. And on a large screen, we want to set the border to be 0. Now I'll press enter again here so we can see everything at once. And below this, let's put a padding on the X direction to be 6. But on large screens, we'll put the padding on the X direction to be 0. We'll save this. And yeah, we haven't put the buttons yet, so of course we can't see anything. Now this get started button, which is kind of like a link as well, it will exist in multiple places on our website. So we want to make it into an external shared component called button link, something like this. And when we get it, we want to pass some props to it. We want to pass a text to it, which is going to be just a text that appears in the button link. In this case, we want to call it something like get started. And then we also want to put an href. Now this href is going to be similar to the hrefs we put over here, but it's going to take us to the call to action section, which obviously is not a link in the in the navbar, but it is definitely a place that we're going to register as having the ID equal to CTA, which is call to action. Then we also want to pass some class names to it, which we will pass later. Now to make this, we're going to copy this. And actually, we don't even need to copy that. We'll just copy the nav item component and we'll replace this with the button link component. Now inside of here, we want to change the props to match a little bit more of what we had over there. So the only thing we need to change here is just add the class name optional prop that will take in a string as well, because the rest is very similar to the nav item. Now over here, we're going to grab the class name similar to what we did with the container, and set it equal to an empty string. Now, what we want to return here is the following. We want to delete all of this, and we want to return an A tag. So it's a button, but it's also a link, right? And also, I forgot, this has to change to button link. Now, okay, and this to button link props. Sorry about that. And we'll change this as well. Perfect. Now we'll have a link that represents a button. Now inside of it, we're going to put a span, which is going to have the text. Now the text, we'll just render it like this. And we want to put some classes to both the link and to the span. For the link, we're going to first put the href, which we'll get from the props. And we'll put the class name, which will be a padding x of 6, a padding y of 3. Then I'm going to make the button be very rounded. So I'll make it full. It's going to have a huge border radius. And the outline of it is going to be none. Now we're going to make it relative. And we'll hide the overflow. And we'll say we want to set a border that we specifically set a color depending on what theme we currently have. So when we actually set up the themes over here, right? The where is it? Is it here, right? So we set up all of these colors, right? Now, technically, this is already working. It will convert our website for those colors. It's broken right now because we are still writing code, but it will convert between dark and light theme just because these colors are applying to these classes that we are using in multiple parts of our website. However, we can also, in different parts of our website, specify things that we only want to set when it's dark or when it's light. So when it's dark, for example, I want this button or button link to always have a background color of kind of like a violet purple. So I'm going to set the dark property over here and say that when it's dark, I want to set the BG to the color of violet 600. Perfect. I also want to set the cursor of this to a pointer because it irritates me when buttons don't actually have a cursor equal to pointer. Now I'll also add over here a hover effect. So the hover effect I want to set it to scale 2.5. And then we want to apply any external class names that we get from the props. So I want to wrap this whole thing around with curly braces and also with backticks. And then over here, I want to set the class name, right? Perfect. Now with the span, I want to set a class name over here, which is going to basically be relative and have a Z of 10, but we want to specify the color of this text. Now the color of the text is going to be text white. And this should be good to go, I think. Let's remove this. Let's come over here and import this. And let's see how it looks. Yeah, it looks good to go. This is definitely not right. Let's go back over here. What should be it? I think it's this. We should probably change this to something like, I'll make it like 102. And then I'm going to also, let's make this into a transition. So I'm going to say transform, transition. I'll set the duration to like 300 so it eases. And I think this should be good. Yeah, I'm going to remove that scale. I don't even think it's necessary. So let's remove it. Perfect. Now let's close the button link over here. Let's go back to our navbar. And now it's pretty much time for us to make the toggle for us to switch themes, right? Currently we are in light mode, but I want to go to dark mode because to be honest, it looks a lot better. So how do we do that? Well, below the second div that we have over here, we want to create another div, which is going to be for toggling the theme. So we'll set a class name over here and we'll set it to min with max, set it to flex. We'll center the items and we'll set the gap on the X direction to 3. Then in this div over here, we want to use a button. Now we're using just a generic button in this case, and we want to set the onClick equal to a function called toggle theme. Now we don't have this function yet. This function is actually something we're going to create with Zustand in a second, but I wanted to just point it out to you that this is where it's going to go. So let's delete this over here and let's add the class name for it. So the class name for the button is going to be outline hidden. We'll set the direction, the display to flex. Then we'll set it to relative. Then we'll set the color of the text to be text heading 2. We'll make the button be fully rounded. And actually fully rounded because it's going to be a circle. Then the padding on all directions is going to be 2. Now on a large scale, we're going to set the padding on all directions to be 3. Then the border is going to be a border, box border. And I also want to set the cursor to be pointer. Great. Now inside of this button, we want to put an SVG. Now this SVG is going to depend on whether or not it is dark mode or light mode. Now I'm not gonna sit here and write the SVG because that literally makes no sense. So I'm just gonna copy and paste the SVG that we're gonna use for light mode, which is this one over here. Now if we go back to our website, you can see this is the SVG for light mode. Perfect. Now there is an issue though, because this is a square and it should be a circle. So there's definitely some like syntax error here. Let me check. Yeah, I wrote rounded. It should be rounded. Perfect. And now it's a circle. Now, obviously, we want to switch the SVG depending if it's dark mode or light mode, but just we don't have the functionality to toggle between dark mode and light mode. So how are we going to do that? We're going to be using Zustand to do that. And I think this is a good point for us to introduce this. It is a little bit different from what we're doing so far in the tutorial because it's more functionality. And if you're not familiar with Zustand, it might sound a bit confusing. Don't worry. But I'll go step by step so you guys fully understand what we're building. So what we want to do is actually, we want to come to this store folder over here and we want to create a place for us to manage the state of our theme. That is going to be called a theme store. We're going to make this into a TS file as well. And the purpose of this theme store is eventually in our Navbar component over here, I want to be able to call the theme store file. And inside of it, there's going to be a hook called use theme store that we're going to create. And that hook is going to return two things. It's going to return a function called toggle theme that when we click on it is going to change the theme, and also the theme, right? So a value for the theme. Those two can exist through a state, but we might want to use it in multiple parts of our website. So we definitely want to turn it into a store. So when we're keeping this in mind that we want to have those two things, let's go back to our theme store and let's import the create function from Zustand. This is going to allow us to create a store in Zustand, which a store in Zustand is going to be represented by this hook that I mentioned, the use theme store. And to create it, all you have to do is set it equal to the create function. Now, the create function allows us to specify what is going to look like how our store is going to look like. So I'm going to create an interface called theme store. And more specifically, in our theme store, we're going to have two things. We're going to have a theme, which takes in a theme, which, by the way, a theme is going to be a type called theme, and it's going to be either light or dark, right? For light or dark mode. And that's the theme field in the theme store. Now, what else does it take? It also takes in a toggle theme function, which it's defined by basically being a function that takes in nothing and returns void because it's very simple, right? It doesn't need any argument to it. Now we can cast the type of this theme store to this create function by injecting it like this. Now, one thing that is interesting with Zustand is that it is very easy for you to make data persist when you refresh. So for example, I will have this state that is going to keep track of whether or not and for now, let me just actually comment this out so it doesn't error. But I want to basically have a part, I want to If I switch this to dark mode and I refresh my page, I want it to remember that it was in dark mode, right? It remembers your preferred theme. Because it would be really annoying if you refresh this and it went back to light mode and you had to click on it again. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to keep track of the theme through the local storage. So in the local storage over here, we're going to have a key and a value pair that is going to keep track of that. And that's very common in React, and it's very common for you to keep track of certain states in your local storage. But in our case over here, we want to make it as easy as possible, and Zustent allows it to be as easy as possible with the persist middleware. So I'm going to import the persist function over here from Zustent middleware, and this is really cool. Basically, when I create my store, I will open and close parentheses over here, and I'll call the persist function, and then open and close parentheses again. Now, in this persist function over here, we're going to take in two things. The first thing is going to be a callback function that will return an object. I know it's confusing just because of the amount of parentheses, but stick around and you'll understand. Now, the second thing it will take in is an object that takes in a name. And that name is going to be the name of the actual state value in the local storage. So we're going to call it theme or app theme or whatever you want. I'll just call it theme. And whenever there's a change in our state, Zustent is going to automatically update that value in the local storage just because we passed this persist function. Perfect. Now, what do we have to do? Well, we have to actually create the interface for this state or this store inside of this callback function over here. So this object over here will take in two things. It's going to require us to pass a theme and a toggle theme, just to define how they are both going to look like, right? We said that this will return those two, so we have to define how they look like. Now, the theme is going to be the initial state of the store. So what we want to do is we want to set it equal to either light or dark, right? Those are the two options. And we can set it equal to light initially, and then just keep it as it is. Or we can set it equal to dark initially and keep it as it is as well. But if a user is using a browser, then they might have actually a preferred color scheme in their system that we can take advantage of. So the way we can do this with Tailwind in general, or with any other styling services, is we can first ask if the type of window is not equal to undefined, so that we know that we are in the browser. So undefined. And if that's the case, we basically want to match the media of the prefers color scheme dark, and if that matches then we'll set it to dark, and if it doesn't match it, we'll set it to light. We're basically saying that we'll check first to see if the window is undefined, and if it isn't, then we'll check if the browser has information of whether or not the user prefers the color scheme dark. And this is how we get it. If they do prefer it dark, which by the way I have to put a parenthesis here, then we'll set it equal to dark. And if they don't prefer it, if matches over here returns false, then we will set it to light mode. So this is how we define the initial theme. But then when we toggle the theme, we basically want to have a function over here that is going to first allow us to get the current theme. Now, how do we do that? Well, with the callback function that we have here in the Zustent create function, we can access a set and a get function. Now, with the get function, we can basically access the argument of when we call the toggle theme function for the current theme. So I can basically say get theme, and it will give us the current theme. And if it is equal to light, then we want to set the new theme equal to dark. But if it is equal to dark, so if it is not equal to light, we want to set the new theme equal to light. Now, with this new theme variable, we know what we want to change to. So what we can do is we can check to see if the type of the document is not equal to undefined, because if it is not undefined, then I can actually add or change the dark class name that we have in our class list. So I'll say document.documentElement.classList.toggle, and I'll toggle it, toggle the dark class to be the new, if the new theme is equal to dark. Perfect. Now this will manually switch the actual color scheme, but it won't change this value in our store. To do that, I have to use the set function. So I'll say set the theme to be equal to the new theme. Perfect. Now this is giving us an error, but it's because I have to set this to be as theme, and then yeah, I guess this, or maybe from here I can just set it equal to theme. Yeah, that might be better. Perfect. Yeah, so now we have actual our store set up and ready to run. Now there's a problem though, because initially even though we'll have a specific light mode or dark mode, if the preferred color scheme is dark, it is not changing anything, right? It's not actually switching the class name to have dark in it, right? So we don't want to make it such that it will only switch when the user tries toggling. So the way we can do this is by using a function called the onRehydrateStorage function, which we can pass next to the name value over here. So we're going to say onRehydrateStorage, and it will allow us to pass a callback function that will give us access to the state, and we can then again run another function after that. Now in this function, we're going to check if the state.theme is equal to dark, then I want to set the document.classList to add a dark theme. Now, if it's not, maybe it already has a dark theme and it wants to be light or something, then I want to remove it. This is just so we handle this when the user enters for the first time on the website. And yeah, it still works. So now let's actually get this working. We have this use theme store hook that we can now access over here. We'll import the use theme store, which it doesn't seem to be. Did we export it? No, we didn't. So let's export this and let's try importing it over here. Now we have access to both of them. Now I'll call the toggle theme on that button. Remember, I left it without actually doing it. So let's set an on click to it and we'll call the toggle theme. And then for the SVG, well, this is only if it's light mode. So I want to actually add over here a condition. The condition is going to basically be that if the theme is equal to dark, then I want to show a different SVG, but if it's equal to light, right? If it's not equal to dark, then I'll show this SVG. Now the SVG I want to show in this case is going to be this one over here. Now I just realized I kind of screwed it up because I separated the SVG from the path. This is the SVG from the light mode. I want to put it over here and I want to put this over here. Sorry about that. Perfect. Now it should be good to go. And I'm going to open up over here our memory as well so you guys can see slowly. There's nothing in our local storage, but when I click on this, we should now see the theme on our local storage. And when I click this, we should now see it switching between light and dark mode. Perfect. Now you might have noticed that it isn't really switching the colors of most of our website. Now some things will switch color independently, but if we want to actually make the background switch color, we want to apply the bgbody class that we have into our index.html. More specifically into our body over here, because in this body, if we add the class to have overflow hidden, and then overflow on the Y direction to be auto, and finally the BG body color. And also I realized that I made a mistake with the index.css file. So you guys definitely caught this. I wrote RBG instead of RGB. I should have noticed because it didn't color coordinate the function. But yeah, if I change this to RGB, it actually gets the color. And if I come back over here, you can see that it is in dark mode. And if I click on this, it becomes light mode. Then it switches to dark, and so on. So we got the functionality for dark mode and light mode working. You can see that when I refresh this, it automatically recognizes that it is dark mode because of the value in the local storage. So now that we got that out of the way, let's continue moving forward. And let's go back to working on the first section for our project, which is the hero section. We kind of left this on the side to build a navbar and just to build some of the shared components, but now we have enough to build this section. So on this section, we want to start off by setting a section tag with the class name equal to relative. We'll put a padding top of 32 just to give some space in the top. And if it is a large screen, we want to make that padding top to be a little bit bigger. We'll put it as 36. Then inside of the section, we want to use the container that we created in our shared component. Now in this container, we want to add a div inside of here. And this div is going to be part of the glow effect that we're going to put on the website. So we're going to have two glows in the hero section. We're going to have one near the top left and one near the image. If you remember the demo, you understand what I'm talking about. Now, for making the glow, we want to set an absolute location because the glow is going to be at a very specific location and it's going to be independent from other elements. We specifically want to make it be at the left -6, and obviously if it's a medium screen, we want to change that to 4, and we'll set a top of 24, and on a large screen we'll set the top to be 28. Then we want to set a width to 24, the height to 24, and we want to rotate it 90 degrees. Now we also want to skew on the X direction 12, and set it to be rounded but in a very large scale, so 3x large. And then we'll set the background to be a gradient. Now the two colors we want to set is going to be from blue 600 to violet 600, and that's kind of the theme from our website. I chose those two colors as being part of the gradient, and you can choose whichever other colors you want to use, but this is specifically the gradient I'm using in multiple parts of this website. It's going to be blue 600 to violet 600. Now this is going to be a span actually. I did this wrong. This should be a span, which actually, so the glow is going to be a span, but we're going to put it with a div around it. Now the div is going to have the positioning as well, so we'll put it absolute, and we'll say the width will be full. On large screens, we'll set width to 1/2, inset wide 0, and on a large screen, we'll set it right 0. Now, the container over here, we also want to set some class names to it. We'll set it to be flex column, and on a large screen, like other components that we've held with, we want to change the flex direction to be row because we want to make this mobile friendly, so we have to adapt to the width. Now we'll set a gap to 10, and on a large screen we'll set the gap to 12. Perfect. Let me see if this already, so you can see this little glow over here. Obviously it won't look perfect in the beginning because we don't have the rest of the sections yet. So this is cutting off. This is just the navbar section and a little bit of the hero section, but you'll see how it will look in a second. Now we do want to set the blur effect to it, right? Because it looked kind of like solid when I showed you guys. So we'll add another span over here, and I'll make this one class name absolute right 4. Then I'll set the bottom to be 12, the width to be 24, the height to be 24. It will be also rounded. We want to make it exactly rounded like this, but the difference is that this will have primary background, not the gradient, and we'll have a large blur. Now we'll also set the opacity to be 80%, and you should see that when I refresh this, I think it's actually, we need to wait a bit because we have to generate the rest of the component as well to expand the height. But there's other classes we can add to this span as well. We can add the same class we added right here, the blur Excel, and we can set the opacity of this one to be 60. But on a large scale, we want to set the opacity to be 95 so that it's more visible. And on a large scale, we'll also set block, display to be block, and it will be hidden. Now, it actually looks a little bit more like a glow. But again, it's cutting off because we don't have the rest of the page. So how about we start building the rest of the page and leave the glows for now. So we'll come down here, and I want to create a div. Now this div will have an H1 tag, which will say something like this. It will say empower your business. So it's kind of like the title of the website. Now it's gonna say empower your business with AI, but we want to put the with AI section wrapped with a span because we want to make it gradient. We want to make it have a gradient color whilst this is gonna be white. So yeah, you can't really see it right now, but we want to make this effect. Now, how are we gonna do that? Well, on the span over here, the way you set text in Tailwind to have a gradient effect is you actually make the text be transparent. So I'll set a class name. I'll make the text be transparent, but I'll set a background clip text, which is gonna be a background color, and that background color will be a gradient from blue 600 to violet 600. So because the text is transparent and we're clipping it, it actually looks like the text is a gradient. I'll also set margin left to 2, and we should see that it has this effect. Now, obviously we have to add some more styling to this. We haven't added styling to the H1 tag or to this div, so let's do that. I'm gonna add a class name over here. Now for this, we'll wanna set it to relative, display to be flex, direction to be flex row, or flex column actually. Then we wanna justify the items, align the items to be center. We wanna set the text to be center. On a large screen, we wanna set the text to left. And on a large screen, we'll set the padding on the Y direction to 8. On a large screen, we'll set items to start. And we'll also set max with none. And max, actually I wrote that wrong. So max with 3XL. Now I'm gonna press enter actually around here so we can, again, continue seeing everything. And then over here, what else do we want to add to this? Well, we want to set the margin X to auto, but on a large screen, we'll set it to 0. And we'll set flex 1. And on a large screen, we'll set the width to 1/2. Perfect. Now for the title, the H1 tag, well, it's pretty obvious what we're going to do first thing, right? So we want to set the color. What is the color of our title? Well, it's text heading 1. So we finally use this one. It's the color that we defined in our index.css. Now, what else do we want to do to this? Well, let's set the size to it. So we'll say text 3XL. Then on a small screen, we'll set text 4XL. On a medium screen, we'll set text 5XL. And on Excel, we'll set text 6XL. Now the font will be bold, and yeah, actually that should be it. Now let's go back over here, and we should see that it looks a lot better, right? It looks a lot better. We have the text, and with the with AI part being gradient. Now we want to put a little paragraph right below this, and also an image to the side, which will actually condense this text to be like around here, but we'll put the paragraph first. Now the paragraph, I want to actually have multiple sections in this website which have some sort of paragraph text. So to do this, I want to create a paragraph component in our shared component folder. So I'm going to call this paragraph.tsx, and we'll create it. Now the paragraph will be similar to probably the, I would say actually the container. So I'm going to copy the container. I'm going to paste this over here. It's going to have the same props. So I'm just going to change this to paragraph, and I'll change this to paragraph as well. Now let's think about this. So the paragraph tag will be just a P like this, and it will just render the children. But what I want every paragraph to have is I want it to have the class name. I want it to make it such that the color is always going to be text heading 3, and on a medium screen it's going to be text large, so we make it responsive enough. Now we want to insert some more styling to it, so because I'm definitely going to insert some stuff through the different paragraphs we're going to have in this website. So I'm going to insert the class name over here, and this should pretty much it. Now you guys might be wondering, why do I make components so small like this? Well, they're quick to make, and also I think they just allow me to reuse a lot of my stuff, and I just personally find it to be more useful. If you want to use a pre-made UI component library like ShadCN or Material UI or all those libraries, you can do that. I like making my own sometimes, so that's why I wanted to make it for this video. Now what I can do now is I can use that paragraph component right over here. So let's import it, and I want to actually insert a class name for this one, and it's going to be a margin top of 8. Now we need to put some children to this, and our children is going to be a little paragraph that I wrote. I didn't really write it, to be honest. This is an AI website, so you expect me to write this. This was ChatGPT. But yeah, most of the copy, the strings on this website were ChatGPT. So like I obviously didn't come up with empower your business with AI. This was all AI. But yeah, so we added the paragraph. You can see it looks pretty good. Has the color of text heading 3, I believe. Yeah. And yeah, it looks great. But now, what do we want to do? Well, before we add the image that goes to the side, there's one last thing we want to add to this section. And that is the little form or input that gets a user's email. Why you want to do this? Well, if you are trying to get a client, right, you definitely want to get their email so you can do some email marketing. So if you're making a landing page, making it super easy for your users to send you their email is great. Which, by the way, if you guys want to sign up to my newsletter, the link is in the description. So yeah, you want to make it super easy for them to check out and send you your email so you can email them back. So what we want to do is we want to make a div over here for the section, then another div container over here, and we want to put a form. So this form will basically be one input long, but we'll add some class names to the divs first. Like for example, I want the input to appear at a margin top of 10 from the paragraph. I'll make the width be full and flex, and then max with MD, and margin X to be auto, and on a large scale, it will be 0. Now for this div over here, we'll set similar class names, but I'll say display is equal to flex. Now on a small screen, obviously the flex will be rows, so they're stacked up. But on a large screen or in any other screen, we'll just set it to column. Now the gap will be 5 and the width will be full. And now for the form, we basically want to set the action to be just whatever, right? This is not actionable. I'm not going to implement an actual email sending service. I have videos showing you guys how to make a contact form in your website, but to be honest, in this case, you just want to save those emails to maybe a database or something, right? So I would probably add a database call here or sign up to a newsletter service. Now for the class name, this is going to be a pretty big one because this form is going to look pretty unique. So we want to set a padding wide to be 1, a padding left to be 6, the width to be full, and the padding right to be 1, but we want to make the display to be flex and have a gap of 3. I also want to align the items to the center, And I want to use, whenever we have any text inside of here, I want to use the color text heading 3. Now, I also want to, and I want to put this over here so you guys can see better. I want to set the shadow of this to be large, and I'll use the shadow box shadow so you can get some of that styling from the index.css file. I'll set the border and a border box border. Then I'll set a BG box BG. I'll set the border radius to be rounded full. I'll set it to be ease linear and to focus within BG body. Now I'll also set the focus within border primary. Perfect. Now that should be good for the styling of the form. We want to have the form contain like a little email icon on the left, then a divider, then the actual input to write the email, and then a button for you to submit your email. Now to do that, we have to first make the SVG, or the icon, right? The email icon. So I'm gonna set a span over here, and you'll see right now it looks just like an ugly but like long button. Now when we put this span, we want to set the class name of it to be min w max and a padding right to be 2. So we have some space between the divider and the icon. The border radius, we'll set border box border, and I want to put the SVG directly inside of here. Now what this will do is we'll have this little thing with the border to the right, because we said border R over here, we just set the border to the right. So that's kind of like the divider that I was talking about. Now it's still small, but don't worry, because the height of it is going to come from the input. So on this input, we want to make the type of it to be email, so it only accepts email. We'll set a placeholder to be like johndoe@gmail.com. And we'll set a class name. The first class name I want to put is a width full, but I also want to put a padding Y to be 3. So you see that it looks a little bit more full. Now, after this, we want to set the outline to be none, because that sucks on inputs, and I don't know why that's by default. Then I'll set the background to be transparent. And this should be the input. Looks great. Now, what we want to do is we want to add the button for this input, right? Now the thing is, we don't have a button class. We don't have a button shared component. We have a button link, but it's not really a button. So what I want to do is I want to copy this component. I'll duplicate it, but I'll make a generic button component. So I'm going to change this to button props. I'll change this to button props, and I'll change this to just button. And the difference here is that we don't need this. We want the class name, but we don't need any of this. We want a children, because buttons do require children. And we'll say react.react node. And I also want an onClick just to put on the button. Now this will be of type void, and it will be optional. So let's get both of them. I'll have the class name there. I'll get the children, and I'll get the onClick. Now we can delete all of this, and we'll just put the call a button here. Now we'll render the children inside of it, so that's any labels that we put to the button. Now the onClick is gonna be the onClick that we get from the props directly. Then I want to set the class name. Now the class name is gonna be a padding X of 3 or 6, maybe. Then a padding Y of 3. Then we'll make it be rounded so that the corners are rounded. We'll set the outline to none. I'll set the cursor to pointer. And I'll also, let me just push this forward so it's easier. Then I'm going to set it to relative. Overflow hidden. Put a border. And on dark mode, I want to make it BG violet 600. Perfect. I definitely forgot to insert the class name. So actually, let's turn this into the class name. I'm going to delete this, wrap this around with curly braces, and let's just insert the class name here. Now I'll come back here and let's put the button here. So in the button, we want to just give it a generic injection of a class name, which will be a min w max, and the text of it will be white, at least in this case. Now inside of it, we want to do two things. Well, the first one is just want to have a span that says get started. And this span is going to have, wait, is this not imported? Yeah, it's not imported. This span is going to have a class name of hidden, and it's going to be on the small, it's going to have a flex relative z5. Now this is how it looks like. Now I think that maybe in light mode we, oh yeah, I shouldn't put this to be just dark. I want to make this, and also I wrote violet wrong. It should be like this in every mode. So we should see this on both modes. I don't really like the border over here. So I should make the border be transparent. Just because I think it looks kind of ugly that way. Yeah, this looks better. So this is the button, and on both modes, it looks great. Great. Now we're pretty much done with this part of the hero section. Now all we have to do is just add the image. Now the image is going to come right over here. Below all of those divs, we're going to add another div, which is going to contain the image inside of it. Now this div, we're going to have a class name over here. We're going to set it to flex 1. Now in large, we're going to set the width to half. Then on large, we're going to set the height to auto. Make it relative, max w none, and we'll set the margin X to be 0 on a large screen, and we'll set it to auto, max w 3xl. Perfect. Now for the image, I want to set the source equal to this image I found on Pexels. If you don't know what Pexels is, it's just a website that you can find copyright-free images, I believe. I hope so. And it's gonna, I can put the link in the description. But actually, yeah, I'll put the link in the description. It's together with the code, but this is the URL. And together with this, let's add the alt for it. So the alt for this image is gonna be hero image. Then below this, we need to set a width and a height for it. So I'm gonna set the width to be 2350, and I'll set the height to be 2359. Then I want to set the class name to be on a large screen to be absolute, and for the width to be full, for the height to be full, just like this. I'm struggling to type, sorry about that. And it will be rounded 3XL. I'll set it to object cover because I think it looks better. And I'll say max height none, max height 96. And this is how it looks like. You'll see that as I move the thing closer, the image will compress slightly and it will adapt perfectly to the screen. Now, guess what didn't adapt perfectly? The button. So there's definitely a problem with that button. So let's check to see what it could be. It looks like it's this, right? Yeah. I'm not sure why I added that. Oh yeah. Previously I also had like an icon over here that would replace this whenever you got to a smaller screen, but I opted to just not add it to the video. So that's why that class was there, but basically we wanted to remove that. We don't want to hide it, and that's what was happening when we put it into a mobile screen. Great. Now we pretty much have this section almost done. The only last thing I want to do is add a little section at the bottom over here which is going to show some cool numbers, right? So if you remember from the demo, it has like 100 plus AI models implemented, 200 plus clients, 10 years of innovation, stuff like that, right? So it's a couple numbers being displayed over here. So how do we do that? Well, even though I'm gonna put it in the hero section, it is also a section of itself. I just want to reuse some of the styling. So I'm gonna add here a numbers section, and we'll create it by exporting const numbers, and I wrote that wrong. Export const numbers, and over here we want to return a section. Now this section, it is going to have a class name of relative margin top 12, and we'll set the margin top 16. Now in the section, I want to use the container, and the only class we're going to add to the container is just that I want to set it to flex, to justify center, and to align center to. Then I want to come over here and I want to add a div that will wrap everything around. Now this div is going to wrap all the different numbers, and it's going to be the actual numbers container, right? Now each of the numbers are going to be added this way. We're going to have a div for them for each section, and we're going to have an h2 for whatever text we're trying to add. So the div for the number section is going to have a number plus a small label below it, which is going to explain what it means. So for example, the first one is 100 plus, and in the bottom, we're going to say, I don't know, AI models implemented, right? Since this is an AI startup, this would be a good number to showcase. Now the styling for this is going to look pretty simple. The first one is the div that contains the whole number section, and this one will be a little bit more lengthy. We want to set the margin X to be auto, then on a large scale we set it to 0, padding to be 5, the padding to be 6 on a small screen, then the padding Y to be 8, and we'll set max width to be 5XL, rounded 3XL. We'll set the BG box BG, then I'll press enter to give you guys some space, and let's just set the border. Now the border will be the same as we've been doing so far. Then I'll set the shadow as well to reuse the styling. And I'll say shadow box shadow. Then we'll set the medium to be divide X, and then divide box border. Then we'll set it to a grid, and we'll set it to 2 columns. So grid calls 2, but on a medium size, we'll set it to 4. Grid calls 4. Now this div over here is where each section of numbers and labels are contained. So all we want to do here is we just want to say text center, and we'll set a padding X to be 5. And for the actual paragraph tag and the H2, we just want to set the font to be semi-bold, the text to be XL. On a small scale, I'll set it to 2XL. And on a medium scale, let's set it to text 4XL. And we'll set the color of all of them to be text heading 1. But I don't want to set it generically above this div because we want to actually have different colors for the paragraph tag and for the H2 tag. So for the paragraph tag, I want to set the class name to be margin top 2 and a text heading 3. Perfect. And this is how it should look like. We didn't actually call the number section. We'll put it below here. Numbers. And yeah, this is how we should see it. Now, we want to add 3 more of these. 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. Now to do them, it's going to be actually pretty quick because we can just copy and paste. I'll copy this and I'll paste it over here 3 more times. Now for the second one, we probably want to put something like this. Actually, I'll just fill out the text for this ones and I'll be back in a second. Yeah, so as you can see, I just added some generic buzzwords that should get people to want to use your website. And we created the numbers section. Now, this is literally just a rectangle in the middle of the screen that shows some cool numbers, and I think it adds a lot to the experience. Now, you might be asking, is it mobile responsive? Well, it is, because when we collapse, you can see that we changed the amount of grid columns to be 4, so that it actually looks a little bit more less condensed, you know, in mobile setting, and it fits everything. Perfect. Now, let's go back over here and let's build the next section. So the next section we want to build is the brands section. So we want to put a part over here that is going to say something like trusted by industry leaders, some sort of like brand affirmation. You want to put logos for different companies that might use your services, or in general, just companies that are related to your SaaS. So I got a couple logos, and I got those from Google. You can get the logos for whatever company you want. I'll put the images in the description. It will be together with the project, so you guys can use it as well. So let's go over here and let's close all of this. We'll come to our app.tsx, and right below the hero section, we want to add the brands section. Now to do this, we'll have to create this section over here. We're going to create the brands.tsx, and we're just going to export const brands, and we'll just generate the initial section so that we can import it over here. Perfect. Now let's go back to the brands, and like I said, the logos are going to be in the description in the repository, and we're going to put them inside of this assets folder. So I'm going to create a folder inside of this folder called logos, and whenever you want to put a logo, you just insert it over here and it will be displayed in the website. So I'm going to copy all the logos and put it on this folder, and I'll be back in a second. Perfect. So I just added here all the logos. I chose just some random companies, as you can see, but you can add whichever ones you want. And we're going to close this right here, and let's start building this section. So the first thing I want to put in the section is a container. And we're going to inject just one class name into it. We'll pass a space on the Y direction of 8. Then inside of this container, we want to directly put the title for the section. So we'll do that by adding a div and then using the title component. Now, we don't have this component yet. It's going to be a shared component that we will be using throughout most of our sections. So I'm going to come over here. We'll go to the shared folder, and we're going to add the title.tsx component. Now, as usual, this is going to be a pretty simple component. I'm actually going to copy the paragraph stuff because it's pretty similar. We're going to paste it over here, and we'll change this to title props and change this as well. And we'll change the title of the component to title. And inside of here, we want to make this into an H1 tag instead of a paragraph tag. Now, we're not going to accept any injections of the class name. A title is going to be the same everywhere else. So we can remove all of this and just use normal quotation marks. But what we want as well is we want to use text heading 1. So it's going to be a very like the main title, right? Similar to the one we used in the first section. Now we're going to delete this over here, and we're going to add a font. We're going to make it semi-bold. We're also going to make the text size be 2XL. On a small screen, we'll make it be 3XL. And on a medium screen, we're going to make it be 4XL. Perfect. Now let's delete the class name injection over here, and we should be good to go. Now let's import the title component, and inside of here, we'll put some sort of generic text, like I mentioned in the beginning, that will say something like this, like trusted by industry leaders. Something that will captivate whoever is going to the website to demonstrate some sort of like social value for your company. So this is how it's looking at right now, but it's not really centered. We have to add some stylings to this div over here. So what we want to do is basically just say text center, and we'll also add a max width, 3XL, and the margin on the X direction is going to be auto. So we'll actually put it to the center. So now what we want to do is below this title div, we're going to add another div, and this is going to be the div where it shows the cards for each of the logos. So what we want to do here is we want to actually loop through each of the logos. So I'm going to create an array here that is going to be called the logos array, and it's going to have the name for each of the companies. Now, what you want to do is you want to put the names on the array that are actually attributed to each of the logo image names. So I make sure that all of the images have the same extension. In my case, it's PNG, and also make sure that you put the names correctly. So for example, the first image is Discord, so I'm going to put Discord just like the image name has it. So I'll put it for all of them, and I'll be back in a second. Perfect. So I just put all of the names of the images. I don't think I forgot any of them. And now what we want to do is we want to loop through this list. So I'm going to map through the logos. So I'll say logos.map. We'll get each logo and the key. And for each of them, we're going to return a div which will have a key inside of it, which is going to be equal to key. Now, inside of this div, we want to put the image. Now, the image is going to look like this. The source for the image is going to be actually not just normal quotation marks. We're going to use backticks so we can inject the logo name. And we're going to make it be source/assets/logos/ and then we'll insert the logo name .png. So two things you need to make sure is that the extension is correct, the names are correct, and also that the folder name is logos. So now let's add some styling, because you might expect this is how it looks, right? So we want to definitely make all the logos look similar heights and put them right next to each other. Now to do that, I'm going to first start with the class names for this. We're going to add some, first a small padding between them. On a small screen, we'll make that 5. Then I'll make the div around the logos be rounded. So I'll make that XL. Then we're going to apply the BG body. So we have the background, and we'll add a border and a border box border, and we'll set it to a group. Now you'll see that what happens now is it pretty much doesn't overlap like it was before. Now we'll come back here. We're going to add the width to be around 100. I'm not going to make it 100%. I'm not going to make it into a square. So I'll make the height be 60. And then I'll put an alt for it. Now the alt, I'm just going to insert the logo here for accessibility reasons. And for the class name, I'm going to make it be a height of 7. Then I'm going to make on a small, it will be a height of 10. The width will be auto. I'm going to make it ease linear with a duration of 30, because I want 300. I want to put a simple animation, right? Where you hover the image and it will actually become colorful. The logo will become colorful. And before you hover it, the logo will be kind of black and white. So it gives that nice effect when you're scrolling through the website. Now to do that, I'm going to set this to grayscale, and I'll set a group hover to be important grayscale 0. And on a group hover, we want to set the scale to be 105 so that we get also the image kind of climbing up. So you'll see that everything is kind of like black and white, but when I hover it, it should change the color, but it really isn't. So let me think about this. Oh, I just did this incorrectly. I put grayscale and not grayscale. So you can see now when I hover it, it does actually change the color from gray to the official color of the image. Now, all we have to do is just add some class names to this div so that the logos actually appear right next to each other. So for this one, all we want to do is set a display of flex. We'll justify the content to be center. So justify center. And I'm going to set a flex rep with a gap of 4. And that's going to put all of them right next to each other so that we can hover them and actually have, oh, I think the Uber one actually looks kind of ugly, but that's fine. So yeah, this is how the logos are going to appear. But I'll just remove the Uber one because I'm gonna be honest, I think that looks weird. I think I added when I was building this project, but then I removed it because I thought it looked really weird. So yeah, these are the logos, and we're pretty much done with this section. So we'll close the brands file. Let's go back over here. We'll go to the app.tsx, and let's make the next section. This section is going to be the services section. It's where we're going to explain what are the services of our SaaS. So I'm going to create this component over here. Let's set the sections. We'll create services.tsx, and I'm going to export const services, and I'll just return a section right at the bottom, and we'll just import this right over here so we don't get that error message. Perfect. Now the services section is the first section where we actually have a navbar, right? So if you go to the navbar over here, the services is actually something that we want to be able to click on and be scrolled upon to that section. Now you can see that when I clicked on that, we got the hashtag services here. And the way we basically tell a website to scroll to the section for the services is we give this section an ID equal to services. So whenever we build this, what will happen now is I can be super scrolled up, but when I click on this, it is going to scroll down to that section, which obviously right now doesn't exist, so just scroll to the bottom. So let's continue building this. We want to set a container to this. So I'm going to use a container, and I'm going to inject just two classes to this one. We're going to inject a space y on the 10 with 10 over here. Then on a medium scale, we're going to set a space on the y direction of 12. Perfect. Now inside of this container, I want to basically set a div. And this section is going to be divided by two things. The first thing is some generic paragraph with a title that is going to just explain what the services is for this company. And then we're going to have some cards that explain each of the services that we present. So the first section is going to be the one for the generic title and paragraph. In here, we want to set a class name of text center, a max width of 3XL, then a margin on the X direction of auto, and a space Y4. Now inside of here, let's put the title that we created, and this title will say something like our AI services. And then we're going to put a paragraph right over here, which will say some generic thing that I'm going to just copy and paste from what I wrote before. Something like this: unlock the potential of advanced machine learning, natural language processing, and predictive analytics. Our services include, and this is important at the end because we're going to list out the services now. Now to list out the services, we're going to come down here and create another div. Now on this div, we want to loop through our list of services and render some sort of service component. Now for a service component that we're going to create, we want to basically allow it to catch a title, which will pass, also a description and an icon. So we want to create a list of services, or at least the data for the services, that is going to contain that. Now, the way I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to create the list of services outside of this because it might be kind of big and I don't want to put that inside of this component. So that's why I created this utils folder over here for stuff like this. I'm going to call this services.ts, and I'm going to insert the list of service data inside of here. Now for services data, I came up with something like this. So each of the services I'm saying that we are offering has a title, a description, and an icon, similar to what we're going to pass here on this service component, and it's going to help make the service card. Now, the title for the services are going to be something like this, like whatever. Think of the services your company is using and the ones you want to highlight. Then a short description, right? Not even that much bigger than the title. And then an icon that represents that service. Now, I'm just using SVGs from w3.org, which you can copy if you access this file and the project files. So I made that into a list because then it makes it way easier for us to actually insert it in our project. I exported that list, and now I can come over here and loop through that list and just render it in this component. So I'm going to say services and automatically import the list. Then I'm going to access the service and a key. And I'm going to render this service component inside of here. Now I'm going to pass the service.title, the service.description, and the service.icon. And in the end, I'm also going to pass the key and make it equal to key. Perfect. Now all we have to do is create the actual service card. Now we're going to have multiple cards in this project, and this is one of them. We're going to put all of them inside of this cards component. So let's make this service.tsx component in the cards folder, and we're going to export const service, and it is going to accept some props, but we'll just keep it empty for now. Let's define the props by saying interface service props, and the props that it accepts are the ones we're passing over here. So it accepts a title, which is going to be a string. It accepts a description, which is going to be a string, and it accepts an icon, which is also a string. Now I'll insert them over here, and I'll get each of them. I'll get the title, I'll get the description, and I'll get the icon. Now inside of here, all I want to do is I want to render a div, which is going to be the container of the service, or the container of the card. Then we'll have another div inside of here. Now this is where we're going to display the icon, but I just realized that if I go to, and I'll import this just real quick. If I go to the services, this is a string, and this is not a React node. And I don't think I want that actually. I wanted it to be a React node, because if I made it into a string, then I would probably have to inject it into the HTML of this div. So I don't want to do that. What I want to do then instead is I want to basically return some sort of React icon. So I actually probably need to convert this file instead of a TS file to be a TSX file. And then I need to remove this so that it is an actual thing, right? And then I'll make this a class name. Perfect. I think this might be better just also for you guys to see. Because then we don't have to dangerously insert HTML into our divs. So let's make it like this. I'll change this to a class name as well, which means that we have to change the type of this to a React node, and then this should be good to go here as well. Yeah, perfect. Now, what I can do is I can just insert the icon inside of here. And if we go back here, this is broken. Why is it broken? Let's check the error. Oh, I guess it's giving us an error because this file should probably be like services data, because we already have this. So I'm just going to save this. It automatically changes the auto import. And let's check back. And yeah. It looks like it's fine now. So great, we can see our AI services. We see the paragraph and the title being displayed. Now let's continue doing the service.tsx file. Inside of here, I also want to put the title beneath this. So we have this div for the icon, but then I want to add another div, which is going to be for the title. So I'm going to put an h2 tag, and I'm just going to insert the title. And below this, let's add a paragraph. Now this one will be with an actual paragraph tag or component, and I'm going to insert the description. Perfect. Now let's check. We should see the stuff at least being listed out, but the thing is there's no styling to it. So let's first add the styling to this top part over here. We'll add a padding of 5 on a small screen. Oh, we have to add a class name, sorry. So we'll add the padding of 5. On a small screen, we'll make it 6. On a large screen, we're going to make it bigger, so 8. We'll also make this cards be rounded, so 3XL. We'll add a border, and we'll add the normal border we set, so box border. We'll also add a BG box BG, then a shadow that is going to be large, and a shadow. Let me just put this over here, shadow box shadow. Now the last thing I want to add is I want to make this relative, and I want to set the overflow to be hidden. Perfect. Now for the icon, we just want to make it be rounded, similar to the top. So we'll say rounded Excel. Then I'll set a BG gray 300, but on a dark screen, on a dark theme, we're going to set the BG gray to be 950. Then we want to set the padding to be 3, and we'll use the text heading 1, and also we'll set width max and relative. Then for this div over here, we'll set the class name to basically have a margin top of 6, space in the y direction to be 4, and I'll make it relative. Then for the title, I want to set the text to be large. On a medium screen, we're going to set the text to be Excel. The font is going to be semi-bold, and I'm going to set it to have a color of text heading 2. Now for the paragraph, we're not touching it, and I think this should be good to go. At least we have everything one on top of each other. It doesn't really look like the card yet, because obviously we don't want to make them look like this. It's too elongated. So let's go back over here, and let's go back to the component that calls this. Let's go to the services section, and in here we actually wrap this around with a div. This div is going to define the grid-like pattern that is going to make this component look a lot better. So I'm going to set it to grid, and then on a small screen we'll set the column amount to 2, but on a large screen we're going to set it to 3. So we'll say grid calls 3. We'll set a gap between them of 6, but on a large screen we'll set the gap to 8, and it will look a lot better. It will look right next to each other, but as we pull this closer, you'll see that it will decrease the amount, and eventually it's all gonna be all in one single line. Perfect. Now this section is pretty much done. You could add more to the services. I like to make them simple. I only like to keep it as 3, because just plain point which ones you think are the most important. You don't want to overwhelm people with text. So yeah, that's why I think the section should actually be kind of small. Now, a section that goes hand in hand with the services section is a section that talks about what the company does and a little bit about its backstory. So like a mission statement and so on. To do this, we're going to actually be making an About Us section. So I'll come over here and let's make the About Us.tsx. Now this section is going to be I'll just call it About Us, and I'll just return a section tag over here. Now let's import it on the app.tsx. So we'll put it right over here, About Us. And this section, I wanted to have a mix of what we've had so far. So we're gonna have an image similar to this one, and it's gonna be to the left of the screen. Then to the right, we're gonna have a little section like this one. It's gonna have a title, a paragraph, and also 2 or 3 different cards that is gonna kind of explain the mission and the vision of the company. So to do this, we'll come here to the About Us section, and we'll first tag it with an ID called About Us. Now the reason why we're doing this is, again, so that when we click on the About Us over here, it will take us down to wherever that section is. Now we'll go back here, and we want to wrap this whole section around with a container. Now this container is gonna have a class name, which will allow us to set a display of flex, the direction of flex column, and we'll set it on the medium screen to be flex row. We'll set a gap of 10. On the large screen, we'll set a gap of 12, and we'll set it to items center. Now we'll start with the left column, which is going to be the image column. So I'll set a div over here, and this div is going to contain the whole section. So we'll set a class name of with full. On a medium screen, I'm going to make it a little bit, so I'll set it to 5 divided by 12. And on a large screen, we'll set it to half. So we'll say 5, 1, half. Then below this, we're going to set another div. And on this div, we're going to put a class name of with full, but we'll set the height to be 80. And on a small screen, we'll set the height to be 96, so it adapts to vertical, and we'll set it to relative. Now inside of here, I'm just going to insert the image, And the image will actually have a source that I got from Pexels, similar to the one in the main section, in the home section. So I'll just insert it over here. And it should look really ugly, but it matches kind of the vibe of this section. Then in the image class name, we'll actually have to click over here and edit. We'll save it so we can see it here. Now for the class name, I'm going to set the width full, the height full, the object to cover. I also want to set the same kind of border radius, so I'll say rounded 3XL. I'll set a shadow effect, large, make it relative, and I want to set a Z to 10, and this is how it should look like. Now I'll also set an alt to this, and it will just be something like this, not an about, an alt. Let's say something like about us, about our mission, something like this. Now below this, we'll have to start doing the section to the right, which will be a little bit more complicated. Now this section is the text and info column. It's going to have width of full, similar to the image section. On a medium screen, we'll set the width to be 712. Then on a large screen, we're going to set it to half. So, and then we'll make a display flex and a direction flex column. Now let's take use of the pre-made components we've made. So we'll use a title and we'll say something like this about our AI solution. And then I need to import this. Then we'll use a paragraph to put some generic text here as well. Now, obviously, proofread your copy. This is the one I'm using, which was generated by ChatGPT. And it is just a mission statement, right? You know, the buzzwords that everyone likes to see. Now, it's going to explain. You can use this opportunity to also explain a little bit about what you do in a more deeper level. Now, I just said whatever it was created here. And I think it's nice because it makes your brand look more legit. Now, below this paragraph, let's make a div over here. And we want to set the section that is going to show the little cards similar to this one. Now, we could reuse those cards, but the thing is, we have a whole cards folder, right? And some of the cards are going to be a bit different, even though they might have some similarities in their UI. So what I want to do is I actually want to make another card file, like another card component. And this one is going to be the info.tsx. This one is going to be a bit different. I want to call the info like this. I want to pass two props to it, which are going to be title and description, similar to the one I had over there. So we'll make title. For example, the first one will have a title of mission, and we'll have a description that will be whatever, something generic that I'll put. But below this, I want to actually make this into a wrapper component, which I can insert an SVG inside of here. And it will display that SVG icon inside of the component. So it's a bit different because in the services component card, we actually passed the SVG as like a prop, but that's because there were more services than infos that we're going to be displaying. So this is what we want to do. So let's create this info component. So over here, we'll create the info. So we'll say const info, and it is going to contain just return here a div. Now this component is going to take in some props. Like I said, is going to accept info props. And the info props, let's make it over here. It is going to take in a title, which is going to be a string, a description, which is going to be a string, and it's going to take in children, which it might or might not accept. And that's going to have a type of react.react node. Now we'll destructure all of that. So we'll say title, we'll say description, and we'll take the children. Now in here, we'll start by adding the first div, then we'll add the div with the icon, right? So the icon is going to go first, and the icon is possibly just going to be the children that we pass. So the SVG that we put in between the info components. Then below this, we're going to add an h2 tag that is going to have the title. So I'll just insert the title. And finally, we're going to have a small paragraph component that is going to show the description, similar to what we did with the service card. Now let's add some styling to this, because obviously this will look kind of weird, and right now it's not even working because I need to import this. Yeah, it will say right now it's just showing the text that I put. Now let's add some classes to it. Let's come over here. We'll add some classes to the top. We'll add a padding of 5. Then we'll add a, actually I can just copy this right from the service. I'm pretty sure this will be very similar or borderline the same. So let's actually just copy that and paste it over here to save time. Now for this one, it won't be the same. We're gonna add a class name over here of rounded XL, and then a BG gray. And on a dark mode, we'll set the BG gray to be 950, a padding of 3, a text heading of 1, the width to be max, and we'll make it relative. Now for the title won't need much work other than just the text heading 2, which is similar to what we did on the other one. I'll also set the width to max, and I'll set it to relative. And let's make it semi-bold as well. And I'll also set on medium screen to make the text a bit bigger. Perfect. Now we should see that it looks a little bit like this. Obviously we don't have the icon yet, so we made a little simple, just like icon for it, right? Like a little circle. But let's actually add the SVG that will exist in this info section. So the SVG I want to insert is this one over here, which again, you can get it from the code in the description or just copy line by line if you can. And this is how it's going to look like. It's going to have the SVG with the mission title and the text. Then let's add another one of them. Let's add the second info. Now this one, the first one was for the mission, right? And the second one is for the vision. Now I'll put some description over here other than something generic. I think I put this over here. And for the mission, I put this over here so that it looks a little bit more realistic, right? Write the mission of your company and the vision of your company. Now to make this not look like they're stacked on top of each other and make it look pretty nice, similar to what we did over here, we have to set some grid standards to the div that wraps the whole thing. So to do that, I'm gonna set first a class name for the padding top to be 8, so we have some space. And then I'm gonna set a grid, and I'll set the amount of columns to be 1. But on a small screen, we'll set the amount of columns to be 2. We'll set a gap of 4 and a max width of 3XL. And it should look a lot better. It should be right next to each other. And most importantly, it should be responsive. Perfect. Now let's go back over here and we're pretty much done with this section. Now the next section we want to create is going to be the pricing section. I just realized I put features over here, but this is actually a section that I removed from the project. I would rather have a pricing part at the navbar. Just because if you are selling a service, which you most definitely should be if you're making a software as a service, you definitely want to put the pricing so that people know at least how much it costs. I always get annoyed when I go to a website and there's no direct way to find the price for the service. So we're going to actually change this to pricing and change this to pricing as well, so that we can click on this and go to the pricing section. So let's make the pricing section. What do we want the pricing section to look like? Well, we want to make it look like every other pricing section, but with the spin of our theme. So we want to have the 3 different subscription plans that a user can purchase, right? And we want to put them in cards right next to each other. So what I want to do is I'll make the section over here for pricing. So let's call it pricing.tsx. Then I'll just create the component here real quick. So let's say pricing, and I'll just return a section. Then I'll come here to our app.tsx, and let's just import the pricing component. Perfect. Now in the pricing component, we'll set an ID equal to pricing, and we'll set a class name to the section of a padding in the y direction to be equal to 5, so we have some space. Now in the section over here, I want to use first a container, the one that we created, and I'm going to put a title to it which will say pricing. Now below it, we'll put a small paragraph tag that is gonna say something like, choose the plan that's right for your business, something like that, just to entice the user. I also need to import the title, and this is kind of how it should look like. Now obviously we'll add the styling, so I'll add a class name to this container. Let's just align the text to the center, and I'll not do anything to the title, but for the paragraph, let's actually set a margin top of 4, so there's some space in between them, just like this. Now we want to make the cards, and that's the hard part of this section. Now for the cards, we will start by actually making the different pricing plans and the information about each of them. So to do that, I'm actually going to create a file in our utils folder over here. Let's call it pricing plan.ts. Not pricing.plan, it should be pricing plan. And similar to the services, here I'm going to export a const called pricing plans. And let's make an array of data related to the pricing of our different plans in our subscription service. Obviously, if you want to have a service that has only one plan, it's like a one-off thing, then you probably don't need this. You just put the pricing there. But in most cases, it is a subscription model, and you have 3 different options, right? The cheap, the medium, and the expensive. So for each of them, we want to add a title, like the basic plan, which is the first one. Then the price, which is going to be something like $19 a month. So I'll just put 19 a month. And then you want to put a list of features on this plan. Now you can put some stuff like, I'll put something generic here. I'll say access to basic AI tools. And then I'll say limited data analytics and email support. And then you fill this out for the other plans. I obviously have filled this out, so I'm just going to be back when I put the data for the Pro and the Enterprise plans. Perfect. So this is the full list that I have. I made the medium, which is the Pro plan, to be $49 a month. And for the Enterprise plan, which is for companies, I made it $99 a month. And you want to definitely add more features than this. I think probably my Pro plan and my Enterprise plan have the same amount of features, which you should definitely make the medium or the expensive one be the ones that are more enticing. So we'll close this up and we'll come to here. We'll now want to loop through the pricing plans by mapping through each of them, getting the pricing, or we should better call this the plan, and the key. And we'll return over here a div that will have the, let me just close this, we'll have the key right inside of it. And I want to set the class name of it to be relative, and I'll make it into a group with the height that is going to be full. Now inside of this, we'll start with the gradient border. So I want to make a little gradient border wrapper that goes around each of the pricing plans. And to do this, we'll have to make this little div that will have the following properties. First of all, we'll make the gradient. So we'll say bg gradient to R, and we'll set it from blue 600 to violet 600, which is the gradient of the project. We'll also set a padding of 1, and we'll make it rounded 3XL and a height of full. Then inside of here, we're going to have another div which will have a class name that is going to be a bg box bg. Then we'll set a border to it and a border box border. We'll make it rounded 3XL, similar to the top one. We'll set the shadow to be large with a shadow box shadow. Then let me just space this out. We'll set the padding 8, and we'll set the display to flex, the direction to column. We'll make the height full like the other ones, and we'll set it to relative. Perfect. Now below this, we're going to have to display the information about the plan. So one thing that you might have noticed is that when I put the list of plans, one of them actually had an extra thing, which is this best value over here. One of them is going to be the best value, and the one you want to shill out to your users, like demonstrate to them that they should get this one, and usually it is the medium one. So I made this property called best value, and I set it to true because I'll show a little tag at the top when it is the best value. To make that tag, we'll check over here if the plan.bestValue is true, and whenever it's true, which is just going to be in one case, we'll set a div that is going to be the little pill that is going to say best value. Now that pill needs to have a class name, and it's actually going to have an absolute position. It will be at top -3. Then we'll set it to left half, so it's in the center. We'll translate in the X direction a half. We'll set the BG to primary. Then let's set the text to white. Also save this so it opened up space. Then we'll set the text to be XS. Then the font to be bold. We'll make it uppercase. We'll set tracking wider. Then we'll set the padding on the X direction to 3. The padding in the Y direction to 1. We'll make it rounded full. We'll set the BG gradient to be the same as the one we have over here, so I can actually just copy this, just like this, and this should be good to go. Now we have 3 of them, as you can see, but one of them has this little pill at the top that says that it is the best value. Now don't worry, I know it doesn't look good yet because we haven't actually set up, I believe, the grid styling for this div over here. But let's continue adding stuff inside of it. Let's start with adding the title. So we'll add an H3 tag to make it a little bit smaller compared to the other ones we've added. And we'll set the plan.title. We want to also, I actually want to grab this and put it outside of the Boolean call. Now I'll also want to add the paragraph tag, which won't be the same as the other ones we've been using, which is fine. We don't have to reuse that paragraph component every single time. We'll make it plan dot, I think it's the fee price over here, and we're gonna add some styling to this. We're gonna make the header be a text to Excel, then the font be semi-bold, and it have a calling of text heading 1. We'll do the exact same thing for the price. I'm gonna copy this and paste it over here. Now we'll change the size. We'll make this be 4XL. We'll keep it as, let's make it bold because the price is important. And I'm going to make a margin top of 4. And it should look like this. Now, the last thing we need is to loop through the list of features. So I'm going to make an unordered list over here. And I'm going to loop through plan.features.map. We'll grab each of the features just like this. And we'll also get the key features. Now I'm calling it key features because there's another key variable over here. Now inside of here, let's just return back a list item, and this list item is going to have a key. This key is going to be key features. Then we want to set a span, which is going to be a check mark. Now to make this check mark, I'm going to use I have an emoji class over here. Let's just get check mark. I think this one should be good. And let's just put this inside of here. Then we'll add another span just to actually put the name of the feature and display it right next to each other. I shouldn't call this features. I'm going to call it feature. And this is how it's going to look like. See, we see all the features being displayed with a check mark to its side. Now let's add the styling for the list. Let's come to the unordered list over here. We'll give it a class name of margin top 6, so there's some space. We'll set the flags to 1, a space, Y to be 3, then a text left, and we'll set the color to be text heading 3. Now for the list item, we pretty much just want to set the display to be flex, then the items to be center, and we'll set a gap to be 2. Now for the class name here, we're just going to set the text to be primary, and that should be good to go. If we go back here, you should see that now it looks white, but if we turn this into light mode, it still looks pretty good. Perfect. Let's go back. And let's actually make this look like make the grids so that it doesn't look really ugly. We'll come to this div over here and we'll just set the class name to be grid. Now we obviously need to set the amount of columns, which will depend on the size of the screen, but we'll set it to 1. But on a medium screen, we're going to set the grid columns to 3, and we'll set a gap of 8. And what this will do is you'll see that if I go over here, now they're right next to each other. Perfect. Now let's go back over here, and I think I actually need to, I need to add another container here and to wrap this whole div around. So I'm going to wrap this around with the container, and I'm actually going to give some margin because it looked like it was kind of too close to here. So I'm going to add this container, which will have a class of margin top 12, and it will look a lot better and more condensed as well. Now, the last thing I want to do is I want to add a button for each of the pricing so that you can get the user to actually go and purchase it. So to do that, I'm going to come below the unordered list. We'll add a div to give some space. So I'll just actually, let me close this div and I'll add a class name that is going to be a margin top of 8. Then inside of this div, let's put a button. And this button will say something like this, like choose plan. Now in this button, let's actually pass a class name and let's just import the button first. Now for the class name, let's add a with full. I want to transform the button, and I'm gonna set a transition transform. Then I'll set a duration of 300, and when you hover it, you want to scale the button just a little bit, and we'll set the text to be white as well. You'll see that what this does is we'll have this little button over here, and when I hover it, it grows up a little bit and then it goes back down. And you might have noticed that I didn't put an on click over here because this isn't functional, but you should put an on click over here so that you can actually choose the plan, maybe go to Stripe and actually purchase whatever this is. Perfect. Now we're pretty much done with the pricing section. And what we want to do now is we want to add the section for the call to action. This is going to be the last section we're going to add, with the exception of the footer. And the call to action is the most important one because this one is the one where you're going to use limited amount of text to entice the user and get them to click a button so that you can actually get their purchase. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here, we're going to add a new section, and we're going to call it call to action. Now we'll export const over here. I'll call the component just CTA for call to action, and we'll just return a section inside of here. Now we'll go down to the app.tsx and let's import the CTA component. Now this component is going to be mostly just some UI. We're going to put over here a class name that is going to be a padding bottom of 20, and we'll make it relative. Now inside of here, we're going to add a container for our whole section, and this container is going to have a div. This div is going to have a class name of relative. It will be rounded to XL, and it will have an overflow that will be hidden. Now inside of this div, we're going to have the content of this section. So we'll have another div which will have an H1 tag, which will have the main attention grabber for the call to action. So this text will be something like this: quick start your own AI business, or something like that. Then you want to make a part of this be through the gradient. So I'm going to actually put a span around 2 words of this, or you can choose whichever ones you want to make it into a gradient. I want to make own AI be gradient, but you can make whichever ones you want be gradient. And I like to put it in the middle because then there's some white, then there's the gradient, and then there's some white as well. Now after this, we want to add the paragraph tag, and we're going to put over here some sort of like more in-depth like call to action. So I'm going to say something like this, like leverage our AI platform to revolutionize your digital marketing efforts, to get data-driven insights, and so on. So perfect. Now, below this, I want to have the call to action button. So I'm going to add a div to wrap the button, and I'll call our button class, and I'll just say something like this: get in touch, and let's import the button. And in general, it should have these three components. Now, obviously, the styling isn't done yet, so we'll come to first this div over here, and this div will have a class name, which will be relative. It will have a z of 10. We'll make the margin X to be auto. We'll center the text because it was all the way to the left. We'll make max width XL. On a medium screen, we'll say the max width will be 2XL. We'll put a padding on the y direction to be 8, but on a medium screen, we're going to set the padding on the y direction to be 10, and we'll set a padding on the x direction to be 6, but on a medium screen, we're just going to make that a little bit bigger to make it 8. Now, on the h1 tag, we're just going to make the text be larger, so we'll say 3XL. On a smaller screen, we're going to set it to 4XL, and on a medium screen, we're going to set it to 5XL. Now the font is going to be bold, and the color will be text heading 1. Perfect. Now this should look pretty nice, but we don't have the gradient yet, and that's why we have the span around here, because with the span we can inject some styling without adding extra HTML elements other than the span in itself. So we're going to basically make the text be transparent, so that we can do that little hacky thing to actually make a text be gradient. So we'll make it transparent. Then we're going to clip the text into a BG gradient that will be from indigo 600 to violet 600. And this is what it's going to look like. So we'll come back over here, and let's now add the paragraph class. So I'm just going to add actually a padding here. We'll just put a padding top of 10. And for the button, we're just going to set margin X to be auto. We'll set a max width MD. Then on a small screen, we'll set it to be XL. Then we'll put a padding top of 10. And on the dark screen, we're going to set the text to white. Now for the button, we're pretty much not going to do anything. So we'll come back over here, and this should be your call to action. I like to keep them simple, but do it however you want. Some people want to use different colors here, and you'll see that when I switch to light mode, it should still be good to go. I just realized that on light mode, these icons don't seem to be adapting pretty well. So this is definitely something that we want to fix. So let's go to the section. I think it's for the cards, either the info or the services. Let me take a look at so we show the icon here. I think we should just actually use a BG body here. And on the info as well. Let's see if this works. I'll close this up. Let's go back to the page, and yeah, it seems like it worked. Now on light mode, it shows the icon like this, and in dark mode, it shows a different icon. Perfect. Now we're pretty much done with all of our sections. All we have to do is make the footer for the website. So we actually have the footer component already, I believe. When we made the elements over here, we made the footer. Now we didn't put anything into it, so we'll actually add a footer into it. And I want to set a class name of this footer to be relative. I want to make a padding top of 28, so there's some space. And I want to make this be rounded only at the top. So rounded top 3XL. And I'll set it to BG box BG. Perfect. Now, what this will do is we'll add some color to it, and it will also add a little radius on both sides. Now, inside of it, we want to first add a container. This container, we're just going to add a padding bottom. So I'll say PB of 8. Then inside of here, we want to set a div that will contain all of the information below it. Now, this div will have we'll basically set the display to flex and the direction to flex column, but on a medium screen, we're going to set the flex to row, and we'll justify between and align the items to center so that it will look a lot better. Now below this, we're just gonna put an image. Now the image is gonna be the logo. This is gonna be the logo section. So for the logo, we'll need a div and we'll put an image inside of it. Now we already have the actual logo image. We can just put the source, set it equal to logo, which we can import similar to how we imported for our navbar. I'll actually just copy it like this and I'll paste it over here. Now we want to set a class name to have a width of 7 and a height of 7. And I want to set an alt, which is going to be the name of the company. So Edge AI logo. And below this, I want to put, or next to it technically, I want to put the title of the company. So I'm going to put a span, so there's no spacing, and I'm just going to write the name of the company, Edge AI. Now let's add, just make the text be large, the font to be semi-bold, and the color to be text heading 1. Now for this div over here, we also want to set the display to flex. We want to set the items to center. We want to put a little gap. Let's make it 3. The margin bottom, we'll make it 4. But on a medium screen, we'll make it 0. And this is how it should look. It should be technically at the left with the name of the logo and the name of the company. Now we'll have some links, and the links will depend on the links that we have on our navbar. So we'll basically remake the navbar but at the bottom. So to do that, I'm actually going to export this so we can just reuse it over here. So we're going to put an unordered list, and we're going to loop through the nav items, which we can just import from the navbar. We're going to map through all of them, and we'll get each item and their key. And we can actually reuse the nav item component, I believe, because it's going to be pretty much the same. It's just a link. And we'll pass the key over here to be key. We'll pass the href to be equal to the item.href. And we'll pass the text to be equal to item.text. Exactly the same as how we did with the navbar. Now the only difference is we're going to set a flex, and we'll set a gap to 6. Now this is how it should look. Now it's still kind of dark, so what we can do is we can actually set the color of this to be text heading 1, and yeah, this should be good. But this should actually be on this side. So what might be the issue is, oh yeah, this should be actually over here. And yeah, perfect. Now this is on this side. Perfect. So this is pretty much it. You can see everything looks amazing in dark and on light mode. Everything is fully responsive. If I were to pull this whole screen back over here, you see everything adapts accordingly. And yeah, this is a really nice website. I personally would use this as a landing page for a SaaS that I'm building. And honestly, it doesn't take a while to build it. If you wanted to do this with Next.js or another framework, you could quite easily just reuse the same components, copy everything. It wouldn't change much. And in today's day and age, I think it's essential for you to have a good landing page if you're going to be building a startup. So now what we want to do is be able to quite easily deploy this application. And the way I'm going to do this is by using Vercel. So if you don't have a Vercel account, please go ahead and go to vercel.com and create one. I highly recommend you create one using GitHub as an authentication process, because then you will be able to connect your GitHub repositories into the Vercel project, which is how we're going to be deploying this project. So when you are done with creating your account, you should see yourself in the projects section, and I need you to click on add new and then click on add new project. Now this is the time where you want to actually create a GitHub repository to be able to push your entire code. So we're going to go to GitHub and we're going to sign in or sign up for GitHub and create a new repository. I'm going to click on new over here, and I'm going to call this React Landing Page Responsive. something like this. I'll make it public, and I'm going to click on create repository. But quick note, you can make it private as well. If you want to make this a private project, you can make it private and still have Vercel have access to it and be able to deploy your app. So we're going to copy this commands over here, and we're going to come back to our project, and somewhere over here I want to run git init, then git add dot, then I want to paste the commands that I just copied, and if we go back over here, we should be able to see our project being deployed. Now I'm going to come back to our Vercel app, and you should see that the new repository should appear over here. I'm going to click on import, and you can see that it automatically detected the name of the repo and also the framework that we used. And all we want to do is we want to click on deploy. So when we click on deploy, it is going to start the deployment process. It's going to queue the build in our application. You can even check the logs, as you can see over here, but I'm just going to wait for it to build. And if there's any errors, which sometimes I hope there is, in case I want to just show you guys how I would debug, well, there was no errors. So it says now, congratulations, you have deployed a new project. I'm going to click on continue to dashboard. This is where you can do things like set a domain, like do new deployments, see the analytics of your website, but most importantly, you can click on visit and actually see your website live and properly deployed. Now, one thing though that is very clear, the images we put for the logos, they didn't work. So this is an issue that a lot of people go through, and you might be wondering, how do we fix this? Now, the problem is that when you have images like PNG files that are in your project and you're deploying it to Vercel, you want to put the assets folder inside of the public folder. And when you do this, obviously over here, it will give you some issues because now some exact paths like this one over here won't really work. So we have to fix them. Let's actually just basically say assets. I think this should be good. I'll do the same with this one over here. And yeah, now it should work. Now the images don't seem to work because I believe they're over here in brands, and we have to change this to be public/assets logos, and or not actually. So let me actually take this out. Let's just make it public, or let's actually just access the assets, and now we should be good to go. So this is how we do it. We have to put them in the public folder because that's how we make them public for Vercel as well. So we make the changes, we come over here, we say git add dot, then git commit. We'll put a message like fixed images not showing up, and we'll push the changes. And the great thing with Vercel is that when we push the changes, it will automatically trigger a new deployment. You'll see over here, it's already building. And when this one is done, it should update the website to have a new version where the images are working. So you see, now it's ready. So I will refresh this. And as you can see, now all the images show up just as expected. So this is basically it for the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I know this is a pretty long video, but when you're building a UI, it generally takes a long time, at least just to get started, and then it gets a lot faster. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like down below and comment on what you want to see next. I personally don't make a lot of videos on stuff like this, like UI based videos, but I posted one recently and people seem to really like it. I really like teaching functionality and not really caring about UI. However, in some videos, especially with TailwindCSS, I think it's a cool concept to go over. So if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, please leave a comment down below and let me know. Also, I am very close to releasing a full beginner to advanced React course. So if you want to sign up to my newsletter so you know exactly when I release that and to get some discounts, go in the description, sign up for my newsletter. That would be really cool. And yeah, that's basically it. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I see you guys next time.